So ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the champion of the Constitution, Congressman Ross!
Does this mean you're going to do real well on Tuesday? Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Thank you all for coming out. I would like to introduce my wife, who's standing down here. And 18 grandchildren with us also, Linda. She's here with us. It's great to see the excitement and the interest and people coming out, and certainly is very encouraging. A lot of people give me credit for encouraging others. Tell you what, when you come out and express that interest and champion the cause of liberty with us all, it encourages me a whole lot too, and thank you very much for that. About the issue of liberty for a long time, and to me the problems that we have today is the lack of understanding and the lack of enthusiasm for liberty here in this country. Although we have had a great tradition, I believe that is what made us great. I believe the revolution was the most positive revolution, our revolution in the history of mankind, because it was rare in the fact that there was a revolution. Too often revolutions go badly and people end up with less liberty. It's one of the very, very rare, if the only time there was a revolution and the people ended up with more freedom, not less. And this is why we revere so often what the founders thought and understood and how well educated they were, and it was translated into a system of laws that they hoped would create a republic, and they hoped that a moral society would protect that. Unfortunately, the assessment today, if we're honest with ourselves, that we as a people have not done a real good job of protecting our republic, and now it's under great strain, and that is the reason the freedom movement and the excitement that we feel today has to be successful. This is the reason where we can be very positive, because there has been a change. I've noticed it. I can compare looking around for the answers in the 1950s and the 1960s and failing to get the answer, but only finding a few, which I call the remnant, the people who held the philosophy together, although the country was going in the wrong direction. Actually, I complain a lot and criticize our president for policies, but our problems are a lot longer than 3 years old. They've been going on for a long time. For instance, we could date it back to 1913 and Woodrow Wilson come up with it.
In the Fed!
So I know we'd like to repeal the Federal Reserve Charter, but I'd like to repeal 1913. We would get rid of the income tax and the Federal Reserve and the foreign policy. If liberty were challenged all at once and taken from us overnight, there would be a lot more rebellion. But when it dribbles away and just incrementally it's taken from us, too often the people become more tolerant and not notice it. And that is what's really happened over the many, many decades, whether it's the wars that have been fought that were so unnecessary, whether it's the monetary system and the tax system and the entitlement system and the foreign policy we have. But there has been sometimes sudden changes that actually made it worse. The Great Depression made things worse because at the time they blamed the gold standard and the free markets for the Depression, not realizing it was the government and the Federal Reserve that gave us the good. It's been challenging over this past century, but another dramatic change that occurred to actually increase the disintegration of our economy and our freedoms happened in 1971 when our country and our leaders at that time said, well, big government works, it'll work forever, we don't want any restraints, we don't want to be restrained by not having enough money, so we don't want any linkage at all to gold. Therefore, governments can spend money, they can spend on entitlement systems, it'll be good for the politicians, we can promise forever whatever people want, we'll vote for them, and we'll keep getting reelected, and it seemed to have worked. You know, in 1971, if you look at that, since there's been no linkage to gold, the acceleration of spending and debt and the size of the government, erosion of liberty, wars that we don't maybe thought have just grown by leaps and bounds. But then there was another event that occurred more recently that has been the dramatic change, and I believe it's the reversal of that trend, of the 1913 trend, that so-called progressive era. Sometimes I'm always disappointed about taking a nice word about being progressive. We don't want to be progressive. We want to progress. But they use that word, and I think they did exactly the opposite. But 4 or 5 years ago, in 07 and 08, those of us who had been concerned, and those economists that knew and understood how the market was working and how bubbles were formed and the bubbles that were present, even back in the year 2000 with the NASDAQ bubble, it was predictable what the consequence would be. But 5 years ago, 4 years ago, in 07 and 08, because of this economic crisis that we're in now, was dramatic, and people realized it's not going to last any longer, and we have to have a new system of economic understanding and a new system of money, and we have to reject the old system of international intervention and these perpetual wars. We need to stop that. That have been talking about a long time, even 5, 10 years ago, so many young people were realizing what was happening. The college campuses became alive. Even outside their mainstream education, they were learning from the internet that there was another system of economic policy. There was a free market that could defend a system morally as well as economically and reject the old ideas of government intervention and Keynesianism and socialism and welfareism. And during that time, it has grown by leaps and bounds, especially with the young people through the internet and our college campuses. So there's every reason to be optimistic that there has been a reversal. I know it's touch and go right now, but there's reason to be optimistic that now the people are thinking correctly. Is related to that whole issue, and if we do well with this philosophy and send a message, if we do well on Tuesday in the various states, and especially in Minnesota, if we do well, the rest of the country and even the rest of the world will notice that the right ideas are what we need. We don't need more government. Against morphing into a democracy. And democracy is a nice term, and having an election, that is part of democracy. But the whole idea of the dictatorship of the majority, where 51% can take away the rights and privileges of the 49%, that is not good democracy. That is very destructive. It undermines the very thing that a republic and a free society is supposed to do, protect all the minorities. We should all see ourselves as part of a minority because we're all individuals. And it is our Constitution and this principle of liberty. We're supposed to protect the minority. That is us as individuals. Each and every one of us is valuable because we are an individual, not because we belong to a group. And unfortunately, we have slipped away. We are no longer that republic. We no longer concentrate enough on the principle of individual liberty, and that is what we have to restore. This idea that the government is there to protect liberty, not to redistribute wealth and fight these senseless wars. Changes that I believe are very positive in the educational sense. The number of people joining our ranks are growing by leaps and bounds. But believe me, those in charge, those who benefit from the easy money system, those who benefit from the bailouts, those who benefit by the contracts from government, those who benefit from the military-industrial complex, those who have the combination of the mainstream media and the military-industrial complex and the industry and the corporate giants, those who get the benefits, they will not go away easily. But the one thing that is on our side is the American people are waking up, and they have started to recognize that the promises, those who have had to pay the bills, we've been complaining a long time, but those who have been on the receiving end are waking up as well because they don't see this as a perpetual wealth machine. It's running out of steam. The wealth is gone and all we have is debt, so they know that something has to change. And I believe very sincerely that we can fill this void by understanding our past, not by going backwards. Freedom has been a slowly developed idea over many, many centuries, if not thousands of years. And of course we had the maximum amount. But there's no reason to get pinned in the corner and say, oh, you guys want to go back to the 19th century. You guys want to go back to the gold standard. You guys want to go back to doing this. The whole thing is we want to go forward with picking up the pieces and understanding about what liberty is all about. Just think how long ago, 1512, I believe, for the Magna Carta, and we've been building on that. What we have to do is emphasize how dangerous a period of time we have now because our own government is rejecting some of the principles of the Magna Carta. So we have to go and pick up those pieces and build on to show that we can have a better free society and a sounder monetary system and a wealthier country and a wealthier world and a more peaceful world if we would only understand these principles. That should be our goal. What they had given us as a republic would not be maintained only with a moral society and a moral people. Laws are good, they're very valuable, they should be a reflection of a moral society, but just the law alone won't do it. So that is the reason they warned us. Writing a constitution was one thing, but if you don't have the morality of the people willing to live within the confines of the Constitution, it won't do much good. And this is what has happened. We have become careless, and there's much more respect for the Constitution 50, even 100 years ago. Just think about the whole issue of war. Do we declare war anymore? No. We defer not only to the president to allow him to go to war, we defer to the president to allow to start the wars, preemptive wars. That is not part of the American tradition. ignore the people and ignore the Congress and what they want to do internationally. They go and they establish the fact that they get their authority from an international government. They go to the United Nations and NATO and undermine our national sovereignty and say, oh, we got the authority to go to war from NATO, United Nations. That is doing exactly opposite of what the founders had expected us to do. There are several key points in the Constitution that we have ignored for a long time. We've already mentioned 1913. The founders did not give us an income tax. We lived for a long time and we prospered without an income tax. People get very nervous when I say my position on income tax is we repeal the 16th Amendment and get rid of the income tax. Change our appetite for government. We have to revoke this notion that an entitlement is a right. Just yesterday, I've been asked this quite frequently because it's supposed to be the shocker of the day. Do people have a right to medical care? And I just say, no. They do not have a right to medical care. They have a right to their life. They have a right to their liberty. They have a right to keep the fruits of their labor. Then they would be able to buy their medical care. Rights. We have to think that through. We also have to think through the whole principle of our foreign obligations. There is this idea that floats around and it's been around for a good many years, and that is American exceptionalism. And in many ways, we have been an exceptional nation. We've been a wealthy nation. We knew something about individual liberty. We knew something about prosperity. We had the largest middle class ever, and yet we drifted over to a position and said, we are so good and so great, we are going to take our goodness and force it down the throats of other countries with armed might. That is not American exceptionalism. To influence the world, what we should do is deal with our own self and our own system. Have a free market economy. Make sure we are prosperous. Protect individual liberty. Have a strong national defense, but mind our own business. Then maybe others would say they are exceptional. They have set a good standard, and then maybe on a voluntary basis they would like to emulate us. That is a much better way to try to change it. The Constitution still says that only gold and silver can be legal tender, but we just totally ignore that. There was a time in the last century where they thought, well, we're going to make people behave better because they drink too much alcohol, and we're going to make sure they don't. They even back then thought, well, to do that, we can't tell the whole country they can't drink alcohol unless you amend the Constitution. It was a bad idea, but at least they thought, we're not supposed to do that without an amendment. So they amended the Constitution. It didn't work, so they had the good sense to repeal it. But what has happened for the last 40 years? They embarked on this war on drugs. They didn't amend the Constitution, and all they did was take on something that is impossible, that has totally failed, cost trillions of dollars, undermine our personal liberties, and it doesn't work to treat people who happen to be drug addicts like they're criminals and make the problems that much worse. We should get rid of that. They aren't hesitant to make criticism of our campaign and the emphasis that we should have a strong national defense. That's in the Constitution, and we should defend this country. And at the same time, we do not have this authority to become the policemen of the world, involve ourselves in the internal affairs of other nations, and settle all the disputes. And yet we have been doing that for so long since World War II. There's never been a declaration of war, and now it has drained us. It has drained us emotionally. It has drained our military. thousands of lives have been lost, and many thousands have of severe wounds in the last 10 years, as well as hundreds of thousands coming back with post-traumatic stress syndrome and brain injuries, and all for what? What have we done? Have we brought peace to the world? No, it has been very disruptive. It has undermined our national defense. At the same time, it has bankrupted our country. And our national debt went up $4 trillion due to foreign spending over the past 10 years. So we will end the foreign intervention. I want to end it sooner. I don't want the country to go bankrupt. Soviet Empire lasted for a long time. I was drafted in 1962 at the height of the Cold War when missiles were in Cuba, and yet fortunately there was a little bit of talking. The ending of the crisis over Cuba happened to be because two individuals talked to each other. Khrushchev and Kennedy talked to each other. And the Soviets had 30,000. I don't see why we should be condemned as being un-American if we say, why can't we talk to a country that doesn't even have a nuclear missile and deal with it? Is undermined because we spend all the money, and of course we build a lot of enemies, and people resent the fact that we're in the country. We have drone airplanes flying all around the world, and people getting killed. And I tried to explain this one time in a debate, and it wasn't well received. Why don't we just think of this in the example of treating other people the way we want to be treated? What would we do? Did to us what we've been to them. Right. What if China declared, what if they get a little stronger and they say, well, we want to protect our oil and the refineries in Texas, so we're going to take over the Gulf of Mexico. Right. I think all Americans would join the Texans in a We've been doing it for 50 years. Many times we have done it secretly, but it's much more out in the open. The other reason why we should be cautious about going into these wars, whether it's the drug war or the foreign wars, is ultimately it undermines the very thing that makes a nation great, and that is personal liberty. There's always excuses being made to undermine personal liberty, so we have to keep our eye on that target. We have to always protect personal liberty. After 9/11, I was supportive of going after those individuals who committed that vicious crime against us. But I was also interested in trying to get people to understand foreign policy and maybe come around to the understanding that the reason we were targeted wasn't because we were free and prosperous. It was a lot more complicated than that. But yet, I still thought, we had the responsibility to go after those who committed these crimes. But I didn't ever vote to say go after every single American citizen and make them a suspect and that make it so difficult to fly on an airplane. Comes from the Patriot Act and other laws that had been passed. The Patriot Act was passed within a couple weeks of 9/11. That bill had been around for quite a few years, but they couldn't get the sentiment galvanized to get the people to accept it and the Congress to vote for it. So this was an opportunity to pass it. The final version became available an hour or two before we voted. There was no room for serious debate, no room for amendments. And then there was an up and down vote. And I remember the day of voting, I was sitting next to another congressman, and I said, "You going to vote for this?" "Sure, I'm going to vote for it." I said, "You know what's in it?" "No, I don't have any idea what's in it." I said, "Do you know there's some bad stuff in this?" He said, "Yeah, probably so." I said, well, why won't you vote against it? He says, how can you vote under these circumstances against something called the Patriot Act? How would I explain this to my people back in my district? I said, well, vote against it, then go back and explain it to them. That's what your job is.
Yeah.
So the Patriot Act, I guess you would never imagine I would work very hard to repeal the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Certainly become very lackadaisical about its enforcement, which is another way you can handle some of these problems. But we had the Patriot Act, and that was, and I thought back then that if we could have only called that the repeal of the Fourth Amendment Act, maybe that would have what it did. We lost our Fourth Amendment, we lost our privacy. You know, under a true republic, the government is supposed to be very, very open. We have laws that even protect whistleblowers, but guess what? The whistleblowers get punished when they really come. If they give you information that you really need, then they get punished, you know, because they have revealed this information. But we have it turned upside down. Instead of the government there having a policy of protecting your privacy, they have a policy of destroying your privacy and protecting the secrecy of government. So we need to flip that back again where we know what the government is doing. And until we get rid of the Federal Reserve, we certainly should demand that our Congress find out exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing with a full audit and find out if and where the gold is.
Yeah. And the Fed.
We also have progressed in a negative way along the lines of invasion of our personal privacy. A year ago, the President announced that he has the authority, because he's the Commander-in-Chief, to assassinate American citizens. He just pulled that out of thin air, so to prove his point, he has done it on 3 occasions. And this is so serious, and yet doesn't get the attention it really deserves, you know, in the media and the full discussion. But I'm sure many of you heard just what happened last month, and the President signed it on January 1st, the National Defense Authorization Act. And fortunately, in spite of the lack of reporting on this in the national media, a lot of people know about it, at least the people who come to this meetings that I have. But this bill, literally what it does is it codified, and they passed it rather easily, tragically. And it says the President can use the military to arrest American citizens. They don't have to be charged, they don't have to be tried, they can be put in prison indefinitely, in prisons that we don't even know about. That cannot stand. If that stands, there's not much left to our American principles and liberties. Provision in the bill that even had made it worse until a certain senator from Kentucky got it removed.
Woo!
Yeah! That provision that was taken out was so bad, and a lot of people even that voted to remove it didn't know, I didn't know it was in there. And that does happen. You know, they don't read the bills, you know, sometimes. But anyway, this provision said that if you are arrested and you are charged and you have a trial and you are found innocent, it didn't matter. The government could still take you and put you in a secret prison forever. I mean, that is so blatant that they would actually write that into law. That before they did some bad things, the CIA and the stuff they do in secrecy and getting rid of the dictators around the world and imposing, you know, in all that they do in a drug war and secret financing. But this is worse because they're putting it out in the open and saying, this is the way it is, and you're going to live with it. I mean, how much more blatant can they be than looking at the pictures of what they do to us at the airport? The prodding and the probing and the undressing and saying that a 95-year-old woman looks like a suspect and we better, strip search her. I mean, this is absolutely uncontrollable. If we can watch that and not do something about it, the future looks bleak. So this we have to deal with. Of course, that's the subject people are most concerned about, but it is a consequence of bad policy, bad monetary policy, the concept of entitlements, our ideas about our foreign policy. This all contributes to the economic crisis, but it is major and it's worldwide. There has been, the recognition of the seriousness of it, but they have done exactly what created our recession. That's all they've been doing to try to solve the problem. More spending, more taxes, more regulations, more printing press money, and they wonder why things aren't getting any better. So my suggestion for the first year in office would be to make the point, government's too big, you should spend the money, the government shouldn't spend the money, so I want to cut the budget by $1 trillion in 1 year.
Yes, sir!
Overseas as well as domestically, but people say, well, that'd be terrible if you don't have $1 trillion going into the economy. Yes, but it would be going the wrong way. The people would get to spend the $1 trillion, and then we might have more productivity coming out of it than when the bureaucrats and the politicians make all these decisions. Restoration of confidence and an understanding of what liberty is all about and what freedoms mean. I happen to have a firm personal belief that our freedoms come from our creators, and people call that natural rights. But the most important thing is each and every one of us should have that. Not because we belong to a group. We should never take away freedoms from anybody because they believe in a group, but we should never give special privileges to anybody because they belong to any special group. Bring us all together, and I believe sincerely it does if you understand it, because freedom means it's your life. You can run your life as you choose. You pick your own religion. You should pick your own books you want to read. You should pick your own personal social behavior habits, as long as you don't hurt other people. But in order for that to work, for you to have that personal liberty on your own life, you have to accept the fact that your neighbor has the same freedom, and even if they have a different lifestyle. And that is what is hard for some people. They think, oh, well, you're going to legalize freedom of choice in all our private affairs and all this. And what if they do A, B, and C? And wouldn't that be terrible? But legalizing freedom of choice doesn't mean that you endorse what the people do with it. Because somebody might practice a religion or no religion at all, that doesn't mean you throw away the First Amendment, but you have to, in a way, accept the fact, be tolerant of other people when they're not out to hurt people, as well as you don't have to endorse these views. I think what has happened 100 years ago as this changed, the founders understood that liberty was all one piece. Personal liberty and economic liberties was all one. But we have chopped it to pieces, and some people defend a little bit of this, and other ones will defend a little bit of this. And we need to bring this together to show that we are individuals. We have our natural rights to our life. We want our personal liberty, but we want our economic liberty as well. If we do this and apply it to domestic economic policy, personal civil liberties, and in foreign policy, I am absolutely convinced that if our goal should be peace and prosperity, that is the road to follow. That is how we will achieve it. welcoming, and just remember there is an election coming up. Our voices can be heard. They're louder now than ever before, and it won't be solved in a day or two or a week, but we are making progress, believe me. In spite of all the concerns that I have expressed, the people are waking up, a new generation is waking up. Those who were in slumber and those who were holding things together, that part of the remnant, they're all coming together, and our numbers are growing exponentially. Thank you very much.
run, I'm getting them. Going up on you.
Stick around. We need your help with organizing, and we'd also like to run through a practice caucus here for those of you who want to do that still. So I'll start in a few minutes here and just run that practice caucus. We got guys outside in the entryway so we can help get you organized. Thank you.
I'm sure you would be, because I think we need to hear a lot of that.
That was good, yeah. That's your job. Interesting.
Any intention of going to war, opening it is
All right.
nothing against you.
Yeah.